Well, howdy y'all. Welcome back to episode number 47 of Once Upon a Time in Texas. I am your host, Michael Mitchell. So, my kids are out for Christmas break, and that's been kind of nice. My kids and wife, actually, they're out. My mother is not out of school yet. She's the technology teacher at a small school just east of Wichita Falls here. And she's not out yet, but she had to rub it in that they don't go back quite as early as Wichita Falls does. So I was asking her about that, and they said, well, we have the county show right after the first of the year. And so what the school districts did in the county is they just said, well, you know what, we'll just go to school a little longer, closer to Christmas. And then everybody will be out for Christmas and then New Year's. And then we'll just have the county show after that. And so rather than school coming back in to session and a lot of the kids being gone because of the county show, they're just changing the Christmas break up a little bit and making it to where the kids are still out for the county show. Just cracks me up. Welcome to Texas, y'all. County shows take a big priority around here. And as they should. So, in other news, my oldest daughter, Lorelai, we are going out today to meet with a local organization called Northwest Texas Field and Stream, where all three of my kids do shooting sports and shooting competition. And they actually have an Eagle Scout project that they would like for her to do. So we're going to go chat with them about that and kind of noodle out some of the details and start that process. So it's going to be a great day. A little windy. Lots of leaves on the ground. But, I think we're going to be in the mid-60s today, which is kind of odd for Christmas time. But, I'll take it where we can get it. So, all right. Let me go ahead and front load this podcast just a little bit today. Have you ever been around someone that tells stories and you just kind of end up hanging on every word they have to say, and you can't really wait for them to tell their next yarn? You're just you just love it. And I can tell you that I've sure been around a lot of folks like that. In my case, I was around a bunch of folks like that in my life. So I have a few in my family. Some people call them bullshitters, storytellers, yarn stringers, whatever. But I've got a few in my family. Most of them are bullshitters though. But a bunch of the folks that I've been around are through my time in scouting, through Boy Scouts, as a youth, as a professional scouter, and then now as a volunteer. And really it's been a great thing to be able to listen to these stories and share stories of my own, all true, of course. And most, not most, but some of them have a little smidge of exaggeration. Because, that's what happens. But anyway, so yeah. So we're going to tell a few stories today. I'm just going to riff a little bit, and I'll tell you how I got to this particular podcast. So before we hitch onto this wagon about stories, I want to make an announcement. I have, as of last week, officially moved mortgage companies. I am now with a company called Victory Home Loans, headquartered in Granbury, Texas. And they serve 15 states, Arizona, California, Colorado, Florida, Idaho, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Oregon, South Carolina, South Dakota, Texas, Utah, and Washington State. So it's really it's a fantastic company. Lots of support, lots of knowledge, expertise, and they're really kind of on the leading edge of technology so far. And so what does this mean to you as you or really anyone that you know who may be looking to buy a home when you send them my way? Really, the stories and, the fun, that really doesn't change because you're still going to be working with me. I'm still the same old guy. But what does it really mean in the long run? Well, hopefully faster, cheaper, and easier service, which working with a broker does for you anyway. but also better interest rates. They are just a larger company with several of the wholesale lenders that we use, and so they get better rates, and we pass that on to you. And so same great excellent service with even better pricing on products. That's pretty much what it comes down to. So that's my big announcement for the week that just happened. We're going to be kicking that off in a big way in January. So as always, I want to go ahead and move forward and thank our sponsors, which are me and now Victory Home Loans. I know there are tons of people moving to and in Texas and, of course, Oklahoma. And I know a lot of y'all know people too. So let me help them out. As I've told y'all before, I am an independent mortgage loan originator working with Victory Home Loans at this point. And so I like helping people get into their dream homes. Working with a broker is better than working with the big box bank. We're faster, cheaper, and easier. And really, we have our customers and clients' best interest in mind. So there you go. That's the spiel. So if you want to work with somebody who's at least a little entertaining throughout the whole mortgage process, which is not always a fun process, but somebody who's a little entertaining and tries to make that as painless as possible, but is also faster and cheaper and easier, send them over to somebody like me. Send them over my way to themichaelmitchell.com, THE michaelmitchell.com. Let me help them out. Remember, when you work with me, I sell dreams, not mortgages. So, I guess last week I was meeting with some friends, some old scouting buddies, and we ended up sitting around BSing as we normally do, and got to telling stories about this, that, and the other. Of course, I told you all about going camping with daughter number 2 and my son. Went out camping with them, got a lot of rank advancement knocked out, and I was telling them, telling some of the other leaders stories about Camp Perkins where we were. And anyway, one of the friends is a friend of mine, a fellow leader named Sharice, and I happened to go to high school with Sharice. She graduated a year before I did, but we were friends most of the way through high school. Kind of kept up with each other. And anyway, I was telling her stories about my scouting experiences at Philmont and at Camp Perkins and all that. And she said, "Holy smokes, I had no idea that you did all this stuff." She said, "You're always interesting and fun to listen to," but she said, "I didn't know you were this interesting," which I guess is a compliment. I don't know. Sharice, if you listen to this podcast, you may have to tell me, have I always been this interesting? I don't know. But I was fortunate to grow up around a lot of people that told stories and really did a good job building relationships and building up stories. And, and so I picked up on a lot of that, and I picked up on a ton of people's, I guess, mannerisms and the way I talk and the things I say. And I get lots of good compliments from people that say, "I just love your podcast. You're easy to listen to. You're entertaining. And you make me smile. Feel like you're sitting right here next to me talking to me." So, that makes me feel good because I really just started this podcast for fun and to basically tell my take on some of the history that I find. So this week, I decided I really hadn't felt inspired, I guess. Nothing really jumped out at me. And then somebody got to talking to me about my time when I worked for the Boy Scouts in West Texas. And I just launched off, and we ended up having, an hour-long kind of BS session, I guess. And I thought, maybe I should just riff a little bit on some of the stories I've got from my time working out in West Texas. And so, to kind of set it up, I worked for the Boy Scout Council out of San Angelo. At the time, it was called the Concho Valley Council, and they've now changed it to the Texas Southwest Council, which my friend Devin is the scout executive for. He was not then, but he is now. And he and I worked at Philmont together back in the day, and he's just super cool guy. But the change of name was a good one because really the Concho Valley Council really only described the Concho Valley, which was right around San Angelo. And inside the entire council, I mean, you've got Fort Stockton, which is kind of the northernmost part of the Chihuahuan Desert, very deserty out there. And then you get down into kind of the hill country type area around Junction, and then get down into Del Rio, Eagle Pass. So Concho Valley really didn't describe the entire council. And so I think they made a good move, but when I was there, it was Concho Valley, and I served the Permian Basin District, which was 21,000 square miles of West Texas. I think my district was larger than any of the original 13 colonies. I think that's what I was told at one time, but I'm not sure that's entirely true. It's definitely bigger than Rhode Island, but I think there's a lot of things bigger than Rhode Island, but, So anyway, just had some interesting times. I remember my scout exec at the time was a super neat guy. He's still around, still talk to him. And, one of the rules with the Boy Scouts is that you don't carry loaded weapons in your vehicle. Like you can carry firearms because, obviously we transfer 22 pistols and stuff around and, from camp to camp or whatever. But like, it's just kind of, considered standard practice that you're not cruising around with a loaded pistol in your glove box or whatever. And so I had that discussion and, signed all the paperwork and everything right after I'd gotten on. And they said, but after they put all that away, they said, but you got to remember most of the country, most of the world, and the people who made these rules don't understand what it's like working down on the border. So if you want to carry a pistol, like that's probably not a terrible idea. So I always did. Thank heavens I never had to use it. But man, it's a different thing down there. It's definitely a cool culture. And, however you agree politically, what I will say is that the border country is not something to be scared of. Per se. There are certainly elements and things that happen down there, but I always had a very good time. And so I will tell one of my scary stories. I had gone down to help our district executive in Del Rio. He had asked me if I could go down to a little town called Comstock. And we would do what we called boy talks. And now I guess we just call them scout talks because boys and girls can be in the Boy Scouts, but we would go down and do boy talks, which typically consisted of us going in uniform. We would go classroom to classroom. We would talk to all the boys in the classroom. We'd give them flyers and we'd say, we're going to be right here at your school tonight at 6:30. If you want to sign up for Cub Scouts or Boy Scouts, come see us. And so fortunately and unfortunately sometimes that left us with lots of time because Comstock was a good, 2 hours or more from San Angelo where I lived. And so pretty much everywhere was a long way down there. But so if you got out there and did boy talks at like 9 o'clock in the morning, you weren't going to drive home and then turn around and drive back. And so there were lots of times that I would, take a book with me and I'd go read in a cemetery, usually because cemeteries are quiet. So I would go read. I'd usually go eat lunch somewhere. I'd go usually meet with like a county judge or a sheriff or, kind of just go see some of the movers and shakers in town. But inevitably, I usually had 2 or 3 hours of time that I could kill. And when I went to Comstock, it ended up being a lot more than that. And so I had lunch. There was a little restaurant right there. And I went in. I was the only person in there. And the guy started speaking Spanish to me. And I don't know enough Spanish to really have a good conversation. And anyway, the guy's like, oh, hell, I'll speak English to you, I guess. And anyway, he makes me lunch and then he comes out and just sits down across the table from me because there's nobody else in there. And we just start chit-chatting. And he was from Mexico and he would cross the Rio Grande. He had a little farm and most of his vegetables and stuff that he used to cook with in his restaurant came from the Mexico side. He would just mosey over there, tend to his garden, and then mosey back across the Rio Grande. And so I thought, man, that's really cool. And there are lots of people down there that do that. And so, but on that day, I was excited. I asked that guy, I remember asking him, say, hey, where is there a place where I can get down easily to the Rio Grande, kind of a pretty spot? And he said, oh, go up the road a ways and then you pull down here, park at this area, and you can, wade out into the Rio Grande, which wasn't very deep at the time. And so he told me where to go. And so I mosey out there, and I just got done taking off my socks and shoes, and I rolled my pants up, and I'm in scout uniform. And I called my mother, and I start wading out, and she answers, and I said, guess where I'm at? She said, where? I said, I'm standing in the middle of the Rio Grande. And she's like, no kidding. I'm like, yeah, it's really cool. It's really shallow right now. I mean, it was only up to about mid-calf. And then all of a sudden I heard this loud bang, and then 2 or 3 more. And I was like, oh shit. And I hear Mom start talking and going, what is that? And I was moving, pretty much had 2 movements, a bowel movement and a physical movement right out of the Rio Grande, because somebody from the Mexico side was shooting at me. They took 3 or 4 pot shots. They weren't trying to hit me. They were trying to scare me, and it worked. I made it all the way back to my car and had started it and was heading out before I realized I'd left my socks and shoes. And so I had to go back down there, but I looked and couldn't see anybody. And so I snuck out of my car, ran over, grabbed my socks and shoes, and left. And so my phone was still in my pocket. My mom was like, what is going on? Like freaking out. And I told her, I said, I just got shot at. And she's like, what? And I told her apparently somebody, that were on the cliffs on the Mexico side decided it wasn't a good idea for me to be there. And I agreed with them heavily. And thankful that they weren't shooting to hit me or hurt me. They just wanted to scare me, and they did a good job. And so at that point, I decided it was a good day to go visit the Judge Roy Bean Museum, which was not far away. Ended up spending the majority of the day there. Took some cool photography, which I have loaded up on my howlingcoyotephotography.com website. But yeah, that was definitely an interesting day. Another story is, for some reason, I hated being late. And in West Texas, you can get away with speeding a little bit just because there's not a whole lot going on out there. And for any of y'all around the country that don't understand this, I mean, West Texas and a lot of Texas, a lot of the towns are about 30 miles apart. And I was told, and I think this sounds about right, it tracks right, that a lot of it had to do with like train stations. And so the trains would have to fill up on water or coal or whatever, and so about 30 miles was a good stopping point. But they would also pick up and drop off mail and stuff like that. So anyway, but out in West Texas, it just seems like it's all a little further, like 40 or 50 miles. And I'd gotten out of town late, and I had a meeting with my Cub Master in Sanderson, Texas. And the guy was tough to get a hold of because he was just kind of all over. And Sanderson is way down on the border. And so I just left the little town of Sheffield, and it was like, 70 or 80 miles on down to Sanderson, and you could just see forever. And so I thought, it's time to book it. And so I'd cranked this old 2000 Ford Explorer that was my business vehicle. I had cranked it up, and I was doing about 105. And I come around this little curve, and boom, here comes Border Patrol going the other direction. And no sooner than he passed me, he cranked his lights on, and I went, crap, I'm going to jail. Because I was doing 105 and a 60. So he pulls me over, which took him a while. Because he had to get shut down and turn around. I saw his lights kick on, so I went ahead and started shutting it down. But by the time everything happened, we were a long ways apart. And so he finally gets back to me. And I'd already pulled over, and I was waiting on him. And he comes walking up, and he said, do you know how fast you were going? And I looked at him. I knew I was in trouble. And I said, I was going pretty fast, but I think you were going faster than I was. And he smiles real big and he goes, you're right. I got you at 105, but I was doing 109. And I was like, wow. I said, am I in big trouble? And he goes, why are you heading south so fast? I said, well, I work for the Boy Scouts. And so I told him what I was doing. And he said, okay. He said, well, we're always interested in anybody who's heading south that fast. And so had a good conversation with him. And he said, listen, 105 is a little fast. There is a carcass in the road up a few miles. And we've seen some deer. You probably ought to shut it down to about 80 or 85. And I was like, really? No warning or anything? And the guy shrugs and he goes, Border Patrol, I don't give you speeding tickets. And I was like, oh my gosh. So felt pretty lucky in that instance. And, the only other time I got pulled over was by Border Patrol again, 95 and a 55. And they had caught me on by airplane. And so they waited for me to get closer to the next town. And they pulled across the road and pulled me over and asked what was going on. And I just told, hey, I'm going to a Cub Scout meeting. Like, they said, okay, have a great day. Another one, interesting story. So there's a town out in West Texas called Iraan, Iraan. And it's a cool town, but their scout hut was built, kind of looked like the Alamo. And so my wife and I were coming back and I said, hey, let's go check out this old scout hut. And there was, the back wall had fallen down, but there was still some scout stuff in it. And, my scout exec had said, hey, why don't you grab some of the stuff? We'll take a look at it. And then maybe we'll go back out there and kind of clean it out because nobody used this old scout hut anymore. And it was just kind of falling in. And so it was just about dusk. It was dark inside the building. And my wife said, I'm not going in there. Because she's smart that way. She said, you go in there and I'll watch. I said, okay. And so I go in and I just had this eerie feeling like something wasn't right. And I didn't know what. And right about that time, I fall through the hardwood floor up to my hip on my right leg, which coincidentally is not, that's the first time it had happened, not the last. I've done it several times because of where I go do photography in old houses and stuff. But I fall through the floor, and all of a sudden there's just this rush of people. And it felt like there were about 5,000 people in there, but realistically it was probably only 15 people. And apparently they were, illegal immigrants that were kind of passing through, and they'd taken up refuge in this building overnight. And my scout uniform looked like Border Patrol. And so apparently they thought I was there to get them, and so they all went running past me. And I don't know what was going on in my head. Keep in mind, it's dark. I had just fallen through the floor up to my hip. And all I could think was, I don't know what's after these people, but it's not going to get my chubby butt. So I start punching the floor and breaking the floor, and I tear out of it, and I go jumping out, the back wall. And my wife, all she can see is all these people come running out, and I'm not with them. And then all of a sudden, here I come running out, after them. And it took me a while to realize that they weren't running from some animal or something. They were running from me because they all kept turning around looking at me. And it occurred to me they thought I was Border Patrol. So they were running away from me. And I was running for no particular reason. So I quit that pretty quick. So another quick story. So we had about an 8,400 acre Boy Scout camp. We leased out a huge part of it for oil and cattle production, stuff like that. We would lease it out, but we would go tinker around over there. Well, we found this huge crack in the ground, and we put our hand over it, and we realized that there's air blowing up out of it, which indicated that it was a big cavern. And so my boss, my assistant scout exec, Dennis, who I don't remember. Dennis, if you're listening to this, I'm sorry, but Dennis was like 6'7", 6'8", something like that. Tall, slender guy. We got up this idea that we should crawl down there a little ways. And so we have, I guess it kind of looked like Laurel and Hardy because Dennis was the tall, skinny guy and I was the short, fat guy. Well, Dennis decides he's going to go in first, which I was happy to let him do. And I crawl down, behind him, and we start moving down, and we're down into this cave, I don't know, 15, 20 feet. I mean, we're down in the ground a little ways. And this one particular part, we saw a couple of big, huge rattlesnake skin sheds, and he wants to go down a little further. And so he goes down feet first, and he said, for you, it might be easier to come down this little section head first. And he's shining his light around, and then he goes, oh my goodness, or something like that. Startled, obviously. And I said, what? And he said, come here and look. And so I'm sliding down belly first at like a, 20-degree angle. Not super steep, but enough to where I'm definitely heading downhill. And all I can look over and see is like this rock wall. And he said, no, come down a little further. So I go down a little further. I said, I can't see anything. And he finally reaches up and grabs my jacket and yanks me down and shines the light. And there, in this little hole off to the left, is a mummified goat. No telling how long it had been there. But apparently this goat had gotten down into this hole, couldn't get itself out, and so it just crawled back into this hole and it died. And the air and everything in there had just mummified it. Like its hair had come off and everything, but it just had all four legs kicked up underneath it like it was just, laying there chewing its cud. But, obviously it was dead. It was just the skin and bones at that point. And I went, holy crap. And Dennis was like, what? And I'm like, I'm so glad you came down here first, because if I'd seen this, I probably would have hurt you trying to crawl over you to get out. And so we had a pretty good laugh. We never did figure out where the cavern went. The caverns of Sonora were, I think, 30 or 40 miles from there. And there was always question about how many of these caverns linked up. We had some ideas of trying to figure out, maybe dropping some dye down in there with a bunch of water and see where it connected up. And then, it was decided that could maybe be an environmental hazard type thing. And so we didn't. But, anyway, we ended up calling that place the Goat Hole. And that was pretty interesting. Rattlesnake sheds to a mummified goat. That would definitely scare the pee-wadding out of you, I promise. And speaking of goats, I'll just share my last story on this. I'm traveling back late one night, as I often did, because 21,000 square miles of West Texas, you'd have a 7 o'clock meeting, and so it may be midnight before I got home. And I'm traveling back, and I forget the name of the little town now, but I'm coming back, and there were always animals and stuff on the road. We were always seeing deer, goats, regular goats. We'd see pronghorn antelope sometimes, birds of all types. We were always running over birds. But I'm cruising back. It's late at night, and I'm coming around this long curve coming into this little town to hang a right to go to Murchison and then back to San Angelo. And there in the middle of the road could have been, the devil himself for all I knew. All I saw was this goat-looking figure, but it had 4 horns that wrapped forward around its head. So 2 came out of the top and kind of wrapped forward, and then 2 came around back behind its ears and wrapped forward. And I swerved. I missed it because I thought, I don't want to run into the devil out here in West Texas. And, that would be a bad thing. And when I say, it is dark, it is desolate. I hadn't passed another car in an hour. I was on my own, right? And so it freaked me out. I didn't know what it was. And so the next day I'm telling my scout exec about it, and he just laughs and laughs and laughs. And he said, have you never heard of a 4-horned goat? And I said, I have not. And he goes, obviously you haven't seen one. He said, go look it up. And sure enough, I did. And that's exactly what I saw, was a 4-horned goat. And they are kind of freaky animals, especially if you've never seen one. And the first time that you meet one is in the middle of a desolate road in West Texas in the middle of the night. And so it was not the devil. It was just a 4-horned goat. Scared the crap out of me. So anyway, there you have it, guys. I've got tons of stories about West Texas and my time in scouting, period. But that's just me riffing a little bit on a few stories about my time working the Permian Basin District as a district executive for the Concho Valley Council Boy Scouts of America. So what do y'all think? Let me know what other kind of weird and off-the-wall interesting Texas history you'd like to hear about. I want to thank our sponsors again, me and Victory Home Loans. Keep in mind, if you know of someone moving to or in Texas or Oklahoma or really any of the other 15 states that I mentioned, let me know. Because if I don't serve that state, I now have partners in this that do serve those states, that are licensed in those states. So send them my way, themichaelmitchell.com, THE, michaelmitchell.com. And remember, I sell dreams, not mortgages. So before we unhitch this wagon, I do want to mention, go check out my newer group that I hope to do something with pretty soon, but life's a little busy, but I'm getting there. Your Bucket List, YOUR Bucket List. That's a cool one that I'm trying to get members built up so we can start helping people mark items off their bucket list. There's a picture of a map with a compass on it. Just go join. Hop on there, join, and then we're going to start doing some fun stuff with it pretty soon. Another cool Facebook group is Our Old House Restoration Wichita Falls, started by my friend Kim Jackson and her husband Mark, one of my best friends. They're working on their old house here in Wichita Falls, so if you like old houses and stuff like that, jump on there. They've got some cool stuff going on. They've actually borrowed all the scaffolding that I've got. They're doing windows and stuff right now, and I don't know, I may have to put them to work over here at my house if they keep it up. Of course, join the Once Upon a Time Facebook page and group. Always put some stuff out on there, and people can get a hold of me. Stuart Brown is the owner, or I guess the lead owner, head owner, whatever, of Victory Home Loans. And he and I are talking about starting a new podcast in the not too distant future. Basically, just not necessarily about mortgages, but just about winning. Just kind of some positive winning conversations. And we hadn't come up with a name for it yet, but I think we're going to start putting that out. But basically, it's going to be something along the lines of winning conversations. So pretty much how you can go about winning at pretty much whatever you do. Super positive. We're going to get guests and stuff on there. We're still trying to noodle out the technology because hell, after 47 episodes, I've just barely figured this out for this podcast. But it'll definitely get you fired up about whatever's going on and in your life, and maybe give you some inspiration to just have a positive outlook and make it happen. So there you go, your bucket list. Once Upon a Time Facebook page and group, Our Old House Restoration Wichita Falls. And then I'll let you know about the podcast that I'm starting with Mr. Stuart Brown in the not too terribly distant future. So thank you all for tuning in to Once Upon a Time in Texas. This is coming out this week. So the next one is going to be, right after Christmas, if I do it. I'm not sure I'm going to have time to get it done because we got a lot of stuff going on. So I'll let you know, but either way, y'all have a very Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, just in case I'm not back on the podcast between Christmas and New Year's. Hope you guys have a great time. Be safe if you're traveling. The whole Happy Holidays, Merry Christmas, God bless. As always, remember, the stars at night are big and bright, deep in the heart of Texas. Y'all have a great week and holidays.